Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Moore, VP of Professional Development at ACCE, filling in for Hannah and Ian. On today's webinar, Elected Official Scorecards. Today's speakers are Robert Medler, VP of Government Affairs, Tucson Metro Chamber, and Glen Oppel, Director of Government Relations, Montana Chamber of Commerce. Today's webinar will be approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour. You will have an opportunity to ask questions throughout the broadcast via chat. We will take questions, audio questions, after each of the speakers once they're done with their presentation. Remember that you should mute your phones, and all of you should be able to see the first slide, Scorecard Success for Your Chamber. You can send a chat question to me if you're having technical difficulties, but we're going to go ahead and get started with Robert. Robert Medler is Vice President of Government Affairs for the Tucson Metro Chamber, Southern Arizona's largest business advocacy organization. Medler joined the Chamber in 2007 and leads the organization's public policy efforts, including all U.S. federal, state, and local government liaison operations. In this capacity, he also administers the Southern Arizona Business Political Action Committee. Medler serves on the U.S. Chamber's Board of Regents for the Institute for Organizational Management, as well as the Government Relations Council of the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, ACCE. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. So, hope everyone is doing well. We'll go ahead and get started here. Crystal, slide's not changing. There.
Okay. There you go.
All right, there we go. Great. So one of the biggest things with us for our scorecard is making sure that we are communicating our legislative priorities and work, especially our successes, to our membership base. For about 10 years now, we have, as an organization, published a legislative scorecard. We get great reviews back from the membership every year. They like the simplicity, the fact that it takes a very long, drawn-out, complicated legislative session and puts it into a graphic, which most people will then be able to understand. As I'm sure all of you know, if you're not dealing with the legislature on a day-to-day basis, it can be difficult to follow and understand exactly what legislation is saying and what the final result will be of a piece of legislation. So just a few things that I've learned through the way of, to me, scorecard success is not upsetting everyone, from members to your board to your boss to other lobbies you work with, and probably most importantly, the elected officials that you are scoring on that scorecard. To me, the success is when you have it and no one is calling you the next day upset about something. So we've developed clear guidelines for what's included. I think that is a big part of how you have the success. And then the most important to me is the clear communication with elected officials. That is my hard and fast rule for something to go on our scorecard, is it has to have been communicated to the elected official, whether that's in person, by phone, by email, smoke signal for all I care. It has to be communicated, and once it's been communicated, it's fair game to go on to our report card. They all know that. They appreciate it. Occasionally they won't see the email or something, but when all of their counterparts in the legislature have received it, it doesn't give them a lot of room to complain about it. So I just think the clear communication, the expectation is important. Like I opened up with, the benefits of a scorecard is making the policy work easier for members to understand, especially board. We go during session, each of our board meetings, I get about 15 minutes to go over what's happening at the Capitol. I would be surprised if more than 2 or 3 board members would remember the next day what we had discussed. and it's understandable. I throw a lot at them, so Scorecard really helps our board know where we were on pieces of legislation. And then finally, the benefit I found for me personally is in our endorsement process with our PAC, using the Scorecard, it's a very objective measurement to say whether a legislator has been with you or against you, or really just not showing up to the job. We'll get to the Scorecard here in a second, but you can see people in the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and then you get a few drop-offs that are substantially lower. You really, on paper, gives you a visualization of how your relationship and influence is doing at the Capitol. We publish it annually for the state, and then we are currently have just started one for our city council here in Tucson and our county board of supervisors. There we go. So for the legislature, we have there are 30 districts in Arizona. We have 8 of those in the Tucson Metro region. Each one has 1 state senator and 2 state representatives. So that's 24 people. And then we also include the governor on the Scorecard. We publish it in our July quarterly magazine that we publish. It is never the focus of the issue. Each quarter we try to have the subject be something of pertinent relevance to the greater business community. But what we have done is for July, we make it the prominent place in the magazine, which is the centerfold. So it allows for 2 full pages, so a seamless scorecard when someone opens up to the middle of the magazine. And then the text that describes the bills is on the bottom of those 2 pages and then also continues on the pages following that. So this last year for 2015 legislative session, I ended up having a 4-page PDF for the Scorecard. The number of bills is varied. The max I've had is 76 different bills. The low was a 52. Tend to hover around the low 60s year to year. And what's that? How those are identified is based on our filter for our legislative work. Our annual agenda has our highest priority. Followed with that is legislation we actually work on or have worked on in the past year. If the bill didn't get through, then that would be included. And really, that's more just a business, pro-job, pro-business policy. And finally, the ones we like to support, what I call good government. An example of that would be the continuation of the State Department of Transportation if it's coming up in statute to expire, to make sure that that goes through without a hitch. We'll send a note to all the legislators and ask them to please support it and not try to do something screwy with it. Here in Arizona, you never know what will get attached to a bill. Sometimes rather innocuous, sometimes it's your next, what we fear, FB 1070. So you can see this. Don't worry, I blow it up bigger on the next couple slides so you can actually see the detail. But this is what the centerfold of our scorecard looks like. You see at the top left in the blue box, very clearly for which legislative session. So this was 2015 was the first session of this year is the second session. And then we have on the left all the names of people, the district they serve in, and then we put the party affiliation. That doesn't weigh in to our endorsement process or what bills we're following, but that was a request from members about 6 years ago. They'd like to really know what party the individuals are from. And then you can see the bills listed across, numbered 1 to 69 last year, and then the voting percentage, and that is cumulative. And then how we do it is A+ is they're with us. They supported us, or as we coin it, a correct vote. The red minus is a wrong vote. They voted against the chamber's position. And then a question mark is when they had an opportunity to vote and they didn't. It means there's no recorded vote. So whether they were absent from the legislature, they walked out of the room for the vote, whatever the case may be, we put a question mark. And that actually counts against them. We don't give it a wrong because it's not an actual vote, but there's a lot of times where someone will step out of the room to not take a vote, and we think they're paid to be out there to make votes, so we include that as a negative. So the percentage is very easy. Well, before I get to that, I guess, you can see on a few people there are blank spaces. That is when the bill did not make that chamber at the legislature. Either it was a Senate bill that ended up not going the full process in the House that would allow them to vote, or it started in the House and it went over the Senate and never made it through the process. So, and the votes that we count are the final vote. If they voted in committee for it, but then on the floor they voted against it, on the scorecard they would have a minus if we were in support of that bill. So the percentage is just all the bills that they were able to vote in, and then the pluses, just, the plus divided by the total number. So, and then below is a short text I pay for a tracking service that gives me a short synopsis of each of the bills, and then I condense that down to the text you see. So it just gives our members, or really anyone looking at this, a quick overview of what the bill is, and then it clearly marks our chamber position, and then it is color-coded to match up with green for support, red for oppose, which same as the green plus and the red minus. So, and this is the second two sheets of description for all the bills. So this would be the following 2 pages in the July magazine. Crystal, could you change the slide for me? It's not working.
Sure.
Thanks.
Hold on one second. Got it.
Thank you.
Robert,
so here's the close-up. Yeah.
Robert, just say next slide, and I'll change it for you.
Okay, thank you. So this was the close-up I was talking about. This is a previous year, but you can see that if you look at Bill 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they were only in our state Senate and did not make it through the process in the state House. So that's why there's so many blanks. And then you also see there's one individual in District 29, Nick. He ended up resigning early into the session, so he only voted on a few of the bills that made it through by then. So we still included him. We thought that was important. If you were sitting there for any amount of time, you should be ranked, especially if you end up running for future office. We can always go back to this scorecard and take a look at it. So next slide. So this is what we're doing new with the city and county. We're taking a little bit more of an aggressive approach. For some of you on the call have been to Tucson, or we've talked before, Tucson is the liberal hub of Arizona. We get a lot of the social agenda items that come through. We just are at the end of fighting the mandatory PTO. For example, minimum wage is on the horizon coming up probably after the Final Four is over. So we have decided to take, like I said, a more aggressive stance. Same communication rules apply. Whatever the means are, we will communicate a vote that will be on the scorecard for the City Council and the County Board of Supervisors. The difference with this one is we like to provide the feedback to our members on our priority issues immediately. For example, I already have the communication set up for the PTO email out to our members. I'm just waiting for the City Council to take it back to the agenda to vote it down. Once that's done, I'll be able to call our communication staff, tell them who voted how, and we are going to use the 2 thumbs you see. If you vote how we want you to, you're getting the job creator green thumbs up. And if you're not voting with us, we're going to give you the job killer red thumbs down. That's kind of where we landed. And so within a few minutes of a vote, the idea is that we will be able to get the communications out from me to our entire membership on a big issue. If not, the next morning, the vote's at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, I'm not going to have a communication staff stick around doing it first thing in the morning. For other things like rezoning for a member, something like that, we won't communicate to the membership, but it will be placed on the scorecard still. And then we are still figuring out if we're going to do a quarterly update or semi-annual update out to the membership of all the votes that have taken place, for example, in the first quarter. Will I get that out the first week of the second quarter, or will we just kind of go every 6 months, put it out, and at the year mark have a cumulative scorecard for both the city council and the county board of supervisors? So we're comfortable with this. I will say we went through a couple different graphics for the job killer, and I pushed pretty hard just to have the thumbs down. We had skull and crossbones and a few other things that might go a little too far. But I think the job creator, job killer with our local government is really our message for a few years now, is it's all about creating jobs here. So that was really how we came up with this. And we stole the graphic from another chamber in Northern California. So next slide. So if you would like to see the whole scorecards from different years, you can go to our website at that link under advocacy. We have a whole tab for report cards, and we have the last few years. That is also where we will post the city council and the county board of supervisor scorecards as we work on them. And if you have any questions or would like to me to just send you any of the information, that's my email, or you can call me here at the chamber. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about the scorecards. It's honestly, once it's set up, I think it's a very easy, straightforward process, especially for the legislature. It's pretty cut and dry how someone votes up there on the issue and the final votes, regardless of the process you have at your in your legislature. And the local stuff, if you want to check in with me, check back in July, see if I still have a job or if the city council's burned the place down yet. We'll find out. So that's my presentation.
Okay, great. So we had, one question about the PowerPoint and will it be available. So this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out to all registrants. So the next presenter we have is Glen Opal. Glen Opal serves as Government Relations Director with the Montana Chamber of Commerce. He was hired at the beginning of the 2013 legislative session. Prior to his current position, he headed political policy research efforts at a think tank, the Montana Policy Institute, a public policy think tank. Mr. Opal served nearly a decade as Government Affairs Director for the Montana Association of Realtors. Hi, Glenn. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Crystal and everybody. Appreciate the opportunity and the invite from ACCE. I'll jump right into my introduction here. Let me see if my cursor is working here. It is. In Montana, we have a biennial legislature, so we meet every other year on the odd-numbered year. So I only have to do this once every 2 years, which is great because it's a big project. We review all 150 legislators and the governor. We generally feature about 20 to 25 bills for the legislature and about 15 to 20 bills for the governor. The fewer number for the governor because a lot of the bills might not make it all the way through the process and onto the governor's desk. And there's also some resolutions that we often support that don't require the governor's signature. We do our voting review as a standalone document. It's about 24 pages or so over the last couple sessions that I've reviewed. And we send that directly to lawmakers as a hard copy. We also provide an electronic copy to them as well. We send it to our board members, of course, and then we also send it out to our full membership as an electronic copy. Over the years, our voting review has become the kind of go-to voter review for to gauge lawmaker support of general business issues. There's a lot of industry-specific organizations, like, for example, the contractors and the realtors that do their own voting review, but obviously their issues are a lot more specific than the ones that we work on. We work on a broad spectrum of business issues, as you all know. And I think that's one of the advantages of our review. It's just a broader review and helps different groups take a broad look at how legislators are voting on those issues. We also conduct a biennial review of the Montana Supreme Court and the Montana Work Comp Court, which is something that I'm working on right now. And our philosophy there is every branch of government affects the business community, and we need to put them under a microscope and educate our members about how those Supreme Court justices are quote-unquote voting on issues and cases that are important to the business community. In terms of trying to get to the next slide, Crystal.
I heard you, Glenn. Hold on one second.
Okay, sorry it's not working here.
That's all right. Okay, just say next slide when you're ready.
I will do that. So we're strictly statewide focus, exclusively on the state legislature. We don't do a local focus like Robert does, for obvious reasons. I don't know if any of our state or our local chambers actually do a voting review. At the federal level, we do a lot of work with the National Association of Manufacturers and the U.S. Chamber, but we really defer to the U.S. Chamber's voting review when it comes to our congressional delegation. We do help the U.S. Chamber, however, with its Spirit of Enterprise Awards here in the state. So yes, we are strictly focused on the state level. Next slide. In terms of issues and legislation to score, it really starts with our board. Our board adopts our agenda prior to the session. We have our next session coming up in 2017, and that agenda becomes our priority legislation. And we usually have about 5 to 10 legislative proposals that are the focus of our agenda. And usually, for the most part, our priority proposals become the top proposals that are reviewed in the voting review. We also lobby an additional 75 to 100 bills every session on core business issues. What I do, and what I recommend to anyone that wants to do a voting review, is to track your time and effort spent on those non-agenda bills. Some of them could wind up being more significant than your own agenda, depending on the gravity of the issue. And one way to gauge the significance of those proposals is to track the amount of effort that you put into it. Another way to determine issues in legislation to score is whether your board took a position on a big issue. And a good example for us this last session in 2015 was Medicaid expansion. Prior to the session, my board took a position in support of it. We didn't lobby it heavily, but we did take a position on it, and my board wanted me to include it in the voting review. We did weight it pretty low, and I'll talk about weighting here in a second, but we did include it. Another thing is whether in your lobbying efforts, you did any calls to action. And calls to action obviously raise the profile of a piece of legislation and kind of make that piece of legislation rise to a level of significance for your organization. One of the things that we do often is what we call floor summaries. We'll send an email to, for example, if to the entire Senate if one of our key proposals is going to be on the floor. We explain the bill. We ask them to vote for or against it, depending on what the position of the chamber is. And one of the things we do with these floor summaries is we remind lawmakers that we might include that floor vote on our voting review. So most of the bills in our voting review, the legislators have received a message either verbally or electronically from the chamber that this is something that we're going to include in our voting review. We have received some complaints in the past that they didn't know that this bill was going to be on our voting review. So you have to make sure that you're reaching out to legislators to make sure that they know that you're going to include a vote on your voting review. Next slide. The other question that ACCE asked of us is whether to weight votes. I say emphatically yes, because some bills are more important than others. And I think weighting also showcases your legislative agenda. I weight our priority bills from our agenda much higher than I weight a less significant bill that's not on our agenda. And I think weighting also amounts to more scrutiny on priority issues. For example, if you cover 25 bills, but you weight the first 2 bills on a scale of 15, 15 points each, if a legislature doesn't vote with you on those first 2 bills, the highest score they're going to get is a 70%. But the point is that, well, those bills were more important than all the other bills, so the legislator should be placed under that much more scrutiny for not voting with you on those pieces of legislation. I also recommend considering weighting votes that demonstrate contrasting support and opposition. If your top 5 bills have almost unanimous votes on the Senate and House floor, you're going to have a pretty skewed picture of how legislators vote on business issues. You want to find those proposals that where there's a split between the pro-business legislators and anti-business legislators, so you can use that as a tool later for your election efforts. In terms of weighting, I weight on a sliding scale, and I use pretty basic numbers: 15, 10, 5, 3, and 1. So the top 2 bills will be 15 points. The next 5 bills will be 10 points each. The next few will be 5, and then so on and so forth. Obviously, 15 is your top priority. 1 is your lowest priority. Next slide. In terms of scoring lawmakers, the next question that ACCE wanted us to cover, we do a percentage score, and I think it's good because it answers that question: how often does a lawmaker vote with you? And I think our members and the elected officials themselves can digest that a little easier. We also include points for sponsorship and committee votes. So we try to take a comprehensive look at how a legislator votes, not just on the floor of the House and Senate, but in committee. We also want to take a look at whether they are sponsoring legislation that is good or bad for the business community. With committee votes, these are most often votes on significant legislation that the Chamber opposed and wanted tabled in committee. If you hopefully get a chance to go into the electronic copy of our voting review, and you'll notice that most of the committee votes that we highlight were bills that we were opposed to. And what we do with the committee votes is that we give a +1 for a positive vote and a 0 for a no vote. So they don't get dinged for a no vote. They just get positives for a yes vote. When it comes to sponsorships, we give them a +2 for sponsoring pro-business legislation, a -2, so you get dinged if you carry anti-business legislation. And we actually, when it comes to sponsorships, we score all the 75 to 100 bills that we lobby. And in the back of our voting review, I list all, whatever it is, 75 to 100 bills that we lobbied that session, and who sponsored them and whether they got a +2 or -2. We also do a voter survey annually. We survey 800 registered voters, so it's a scientific poll. And from that data, from the poll, we do what's called a district report. And just to put it in simple terms, it indicates a constituent's pro-business intensity. So you see in this poll out here that visual here, the district P-base score there. If it's 50 and over, it indicates a pro-business district. If it's 50 and under, it indicates a less pro-business or even anti-business district. And the reason we include that there is so that you can look at the final score that the legislator gets and compare it to where are his constituents at. Let's say you have a Democrat legislator that gets a 60% on your voting review and but his district has a 40 district P-base score. He's actually voting better and on business issues than his constituents would if they were in his shoes. So that's just a little bit of an indicator of how that legislator is following the wishes of his constituents. And then, of course, our final business scores you see here in the pull-out is just a combination of floor votes, those weighted floor votes, sponsorships, and committee votes. Next slide.
Hold on 1 second, Glenn. It seems to be go.
Okay, great. So when in using our scorecard, I've got a few slides on this. In terms of recognition, we do what's called our most valuable policymaker, and we have criteria for that award. It's an individual legislator. And those three criteria are no sponsorship of anti-business legislation. They have to support the top 4 priorities, and they cannot sponsor, or they have to sponsor at least one piece of pro-business legislation. Our most valuable policymaker basically scored a computed score of 117%. We do cap our scores at 100%, but because we add in committee votes as well as sponsorships, legislators can technically get over 100%. We also have an award for what we call Champion of Business. It's basically the same as the MVP, plus they have to carry a pro-business bill on the floor. In our 2013 review, as I mentioned, we had, never mind that point. And then our last level of recognition is honorable mention. They have to support the top 2 pieces of legislation. They have to sponsor a pro-business bill, carry something on the floor, or make a pro-business floor speech. And if you're going to track, one thing to keep in mind, if you're going to give credit for floor speeches, you have to be paying attention to what's going on the floor and knowing where to recognize legislators for a positive floor speech. And we do an award ceremony in conjunction with a 7-city summer economic update series that we do in conjunction with the University of Montana's Bureau of Business and Economic Research. So that's how we get out into the communities and recognize legislators that did well in our voting review. Next slide. In terms of publicity, we do quite a bit. As I mentioned earlier, we do an announcement and distribution to the membership in electronic format. We do that via our constant contact email system. We also do, through our constant contact, email to legislators. We do a press release to statewide media outlets. And then we also do a press release to regional media outlets and recognizing the pro-business legislators. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of at least the dailies in Montana, basically ignore voting reviews because they feel that they're biased. But the weekly papers pick it up, and which is where that's something you want to happen because that's where the voters are, and that's the folks that actually know the legislators that you're awarding. Next slide. We also use the scorecard for our election work. The voting review serves as a guide for chamber PACs. We have 2 PACs, a hard dollar PAC and a soft dollar PAC. And we have a PAC steering committee that oversees that. They use the voting review to guide incumbent support. We also do some candidate recruitment. If we find somebody with a very low score and we might want to bring a challenger in a primary race, we often use the voting review to help us determine if that's a good idea. And we also use it in election materials, independent expenditures, direct mail, radio, TV, billboards, etc. Other business groups also use our voting review for their PACs. A lot, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the industry-specific organizations do their own voting reviews, but often use ours, again, as a go-to review. We also have a lot of corporate members here at the Chamber that run their own PACs. They're usually employee PACs, and they love the scorecard and use it quite a bit. And of course, the candidates use our voting score and recognition on their materials. You'll often see a legislator mentioning that they got 100% on the U.S. Chamber's voting review. And the last slide. So we also have all our voting reviews going back to 2001 at the link listed here. One of the things I wanted to mention is that I couldn't do this and compile the voting reviews without spreadsheets, and I'm sure Robert probably does the same thing. If you're scoring 25 bills and you've got 150 legislators, you're entering basically almost 4,000 votes. And you've got to keep track of those. You don't want to make mistakes and give a legislator the wrong score, because if you do, you're going to hear from them. And I'm more than happy to provide these spreadsheets to anybody that's interested in, and be happy to walk folks through the way I put the spreadsheets together so you can get your computations right. I thought I had my contact information on here, but it doesn't look like it made it through. But my email is Glenn with 2 N's at montanachamber.com, and my phone number is 406-442-2405. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Glenn and Robert. I do have a couple of chat questions. The first one is for Robert. How long have you been doing a scorecard, and how did the legislators take it when it was introduced?
We started doing the scorecard, I think, 10 years ago now, and that started a few years before I got here. So I walked into a basic system. At that time, I think we only had 5 districts that encompassed the Tucson region, so it's grown by 3 in the last decade. The legislators, by and large, are fine with it. I mean, it's based on fact. It's Glenn's point is exactly right. You don't want to make a mistake, and it is such a tedious process to go through and check it. I'm lucky to have a few interns from U of A here working for me, They do the initial, and then I run through it with them, and then I actually sit down with my admin that the president and I share. She's very, very detail oriented, and we go through every single box to make sure it's right. And we have yet to be told we have a mistake. We've been accused of it, and I'll go back and pull the votes and correct the legislator. So that's the only feedback we ever get is when they don't remember how they vote, they'll give you a call and say. So just making sure that you do it right is probably the biggest part.
Okay. This next question is rather lengthy, so bear with me. We note that you both publish only actual voting records. We have a county council that thrives on introducing lots of job-killing and anti-development legislation that we have to fight throughout the year. Fortunately, most of this does not get through and does not get to a vote. Still, it's a nuisance. It's nuisance legislation that requires us to engage in a fight and sends a message that we are not a business-friendly region. We want to communicate this, but a scorecard does not work. Any thoughts on how we can do this?
I'll take the first stab at it. So the PTO issue I mentioned, when that goes back to council, they will have to have that discussion likely at their study session, which is where it started. So we are actually going to include votes at study session, which, where they basically directs the manager and staff to go down a road. And so we've got a handful of council members who are opposed to the idea now, but when it first came to them, they voted to start the stakeholders group. As a result of just the conversation on PTO, we lost 2 businesses with almost a combined 500 employee base. We're going to put that vote on there. And that's one of the things I think they're not going to really like, because they'll come back and say, well, I voted against it in the end. That's what you guys wanted. But it's getting them to recognize that just having discussion on things that can be perceived as anti-business have an effect in the real world, and educating them on that. So that's how we're going to go about doing it, is including, non-official votes, since there's no legal ramification of the vote, but it still occurs in this direction from it. So I don't know if Glenn's got anything to add.
Yeah, Robert makes a good point. Look at procedural votes is what I call them. It's not a vote on the actual piece of legislation per se. It's a vote on whether you move forward. For example, you might have a bill that dies on the floor. Well, procedurally, you could have a motion to reconsider and have it put on the floor again. And I've scored those motions to reconsider in the past because, again, usually if you have a bill that dies on the floor, hopefully, if you've got room in the vote that you saw earlier to do some lobbying and maybe get an extra few votes and pass a motion to reconsider, that procedural vote is worth. I think this is Glenn. I think the key is to be, with your voting reviews, you've got to be communicating. If you're going to do one and you're going to score their votes on issues, you've got to be communicating with them the position of your organization, your chamber, on a regular basis. It's got to be clear to those lawmakers where you stand on the issues that they're voting on. I think if you communicate with them, they're going to be less offended or frustrated when you put out a voting review.
I agree. Communication is absolutely key. I also think one of the things is if you look at how we do the state, it's all based, or the state scorecard, it is all based on fact. from the votes to the percentages to, if you read the descriptions, they're very technical in nature of just what's in the bill. And so it stays away from language that could be offensive or, incendiary to an elected official. It's just based on fact. And so I think that's the reason why we don't get a lot of pushback, is all we're doing is taking what has happened up at the state capitol and just reformatting it to a simple form. There's not a lot for someone to be upset with. I mean, it really is just fact, and it's just a simplification and turning it into a graphic for people to understand. If you've got if you're doing the same thing and you've got a local official that is very upset with you, and the descriptions are technical, just what this would do, what change in the law or ordinance it would have, not what it would do to the business community, just on how it changes the law, and they're upset about that, I think you have a question, ask them and ask yourself if you support them, what are they trying to hide? What type of conversation do they not want out?
And I think another key, and Robert mentioned this earlier, is to have a record. You might get a legislator that calls out and says, "Wait a minute, I don't remember voting that way on that." And you should be able to go to your files and pull out the archive of the vote and say, "No, here's what you did." And in the committee, for example, you might even have be able to track a statement that they made in favor of something or against something that you were working on. So you need to have a record so that you can back up your voting review.
Okay, the next question, do you score amendments as well?
I'll jump in. I think in the past I think I've scored amendments. Ultimately, though, if you're scoring amendments, you might get a cluttered voting review. Ultimately, what you want is that final piece of legislation, whether you support it or oppose it. That's what you want to base your review on. But I think in the past I've more likely to review a procedural vote as opposed to an amendment, though. I don't know about Robert. I don't know if
I stay away from amendments. I have not figured out a good way to include them in the scorecard. We do so many bills as it is. I try to just keep it simple, and it's on the final vote. And we switch positions on a bill. We'll oppose it in committee before it's heard and communicate that, and then we get the amendment that fixes it, and now we support it, and it's just about communicating it. So that's why I go with the last possible vote a legislator could possibly make on a bill, because we either support that or we oppose it and need them to vote accordingly.
The only situation you might consider doing it, now I'm thinking about it, is let's say you've got a piece of legislation on the floor and someone motions to amend it, and that amendment winds up killing the bill. And one of your priorities gets tanked because of that amendment. I could see scoring that because it's the amendment itself that brought the bill down. I don't know if it'd be if it was a positive amendment, that made the bill better. You probably wouldn't score that because you're still going to have that last vote coming, that third reading vote coming.
Okay, let's see. I think I have two more questions. How do you handle budget bills that have hundreds of good and bad policy items in them? Sometimes some of the most significant issues of a session.
Well,
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks. I don't score budget. I think it's budget bills, right, Crystal, is what they said?
That's correct.
Yeah. Budget bills like our House Bill 2, it's just an omnibus, spending bill. You we wouldn't score that. It's kind of off our reservation anyway, but we did score a omnibus infrastructure spending bill, though, which had a lot of stuff in it, some stuff that we agreed with and some that we didn't. So, you have to kind of look at the bill in its totality and say, is this something that the chamber really wanted to pass? And if it's part of your top agenda, then yes, score it, even if it has some stuff in it that you're not sure about. If it has stuff in it that has a significant negative for your organization, then I wouldn't score it, or you would score it the other way and ding legislators for a positive vote.
Okay. So the last question we have is someone's asking for recommendations on tracking services.
Oh, I know that there's some tracking services out there. Our legislature does a really good job with the legislative website. It's our laws database, and you can sign up with our website to get notices, hearing notices, and all kinds of information on legislation that you're tracking. And as I mentioned earlier, as you're lobbying, and this is something, I track all the bills that I lobby because I have to report what I'm working on and how much time and money I'm spending on legislation. So it serves a kind of a double purpose when it comes to the voting review, because then I can turn around and look at the bills that I've worked on more than others.
And for us, our legislature has invested a fair amount into redoing the ability for citizens to sign in to speak on bills, but also they're on the same website now. You can do a tracking list. I pay for an independent service. They'll pull the votes for me. They do summaries. I can have multiple tracking lists. I can publish a tracking list to a web address, so I can send that out. So like my board has one tracking list. We have another one on our website. So I think you just really have to find what works best for you and your needs. If we weren't doing so much of the state and I was only following 30, 40, 50 bills, I would probably just use the free service. It's pretty good. So I think you just have to find what's out there and call your state chamber, call the Metro Chamber that's in the city where the state capital is, and I think they'd probably be able to guide you best for your state.
All right. Well, thank you both very much, Robert and Glenn, for this wonderful webinar. Again, this is it is recorded and it'll be made available in at least 24 hours to all registrants. I think we got through all of the questions. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And Robert and Glenn, you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.